Sear, our non-stimulant, thermogenic, and recomposition agent. Sear is a super cool product because it's going to help you utilize turning your white adipose tissue, which is for storage of fat, into brown adipose tissue, which is going to help with energy production. So this is great to use for a competition prep or in your weight loss phase. So you can stack it with a stimulant-based thermogenic, or you could also use it in your off-season or muscle building phase to help keep you lean and mean. Sear.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Pro Physique Code. We got Lexi, we got Evan, we got me, and we got a fun topic today. I believe this was kind of your thought, Lexi. Feel like you might be dealing with this yourself right now with some clients.
Yes, so exactly why I thought we could do this this episode, and because I think every coach can resonate, but every client is going to be able to resonate. I think a lot with, I like to call it like the 3-4 week out freak out, where you have clients that are like, oh my God, like personally for me, I've always felt like the 3-4 week out mark is the hardest. But I feel like that's usually the time where a lot of clients are susceptible to like having the thoughts of, why am I doing this? Is it even worth it? Because you're just feeling really tired, really depleted, and then feeling like, oh my gosh, am I going to be ready? I don't feel like I like the way I look. I don't think I'm going to place well. Like all those thoughts, I feel like hit you like a ton of bricks. So we're going to chat about that.
Absolutely. Good topic. So I guess let's just talk about 4 weeks out then. I think that's probably.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit too, because I mean, we are all competitors ourselves. I think we can all give a little insight into like how we personally cope with the last couple weeks of prep and like how to survive the last couple weeks of prep. But I guess first off, Paul, you were at Junior Nationals this past weekend, so tell us a little bit about it, what the experience was like, some thoughts.
Yeah, I was very pleasantly surprised. I know we discussed on one of the podcasts earlier about the significant drop off in bikini at Junior USA. So I was very curious, but basically the numbers were the same as last year. So while there was only 52 bikini at Junior USA, there was 113 at Junior Nationals. And last year they were at 117 for bikini. So basically the same. I did notice a big drop off on figure again. There was only 32 or 33 figure competitors. In fact, I think Class A had 4, B had like 5. It was pretty small. But I think overall Junior Nationals numbers were actually up slightly. That's what Sandy told me. So, and that does not include the pros, the NPC, so that's good. That's a good sign. So maybe it was just an early year thing, with Junior USA's. I think we'll find out right away. We got 12 days, 11 days till Universe. Yeah. So that's going to be another good indicator.
Well, I was really excited to see, like watching from afar, watching the live stream of Junior Nationals. I was really excited to see how many of the girls who got their pro card, how many jumped into the pro show that evening. And I was also, I was thinking to myself, wow, the pro show didn't end up starting until like what, 7:30? I can imagine, it was for the pros who didn't do the amateur show, for the actual pros that were already a pro. I'm sure that was a long time too, to like hold that conditioning, since it didn't start until like 7:30.
Yeah, you definitely have to have a plan in place, and I think it showed with some of the athletes that were a little off, some were on. I always find it's my advantage coaching athletes the way I do, because we're eating into the show. So, basically on Friday I saw Ashley at around 6-7 o'clock. I said, this is the look. I said we could be a little bit fuller, so I said we're going to do the same thing we did today, but we're just going to be a little more aggressive with food. And it worked out perfect. I loved how she looked. So she, I didn't find it to be a problem. The girl that won was Raina, and she was at her own show. It was her and everyone else, right? They were looking for 2, 3, 4. She stood out like, yeah, she's got a fantastic physique. So I don't know that I've ever seen her in person, or maybe I just haven't seen her in person looking like that. I think she's from Mexico. So yeah, they immediately just put her right in the middle, and then they moved several people in. The girl that won Toronto ended up in 4th. So they gave her a look and moved her right out. Jody Yunker, who hasn't been on stage in well over a year, I believe. I think she took last year all off.
Yep.
She took 2nd. I think that's the best I've seen her. She looked great. Shape looked great. Waist looked tiny. Glutes looked full. I was a little surprised to see Masa and Sierra get kind of moved out. They weren't really given a look. They were not in that top 6. But it was all the usual suspects. You know, Yulia was in 6, and so it was it was definitely not predictable. But backstage, when I saw that Reina girl, I mean, she gave me like, she had glutes like Ari's, where like she's just standing there and you're like, oh my gosh, like her glutes are very full, even just not
Mhm.
even being posing. So yeah, but it was interesting because I think pretty much all the competitors that got their pro card did the show. None of them, even the overall winner, were ever in contention. Like they didn't get a look.
Yeah, and I think that's what I was a little surprised about because I know when we talked last week, we kind of thought maybe that whoever won the overall, since they're fresh in the judge's mind, they would do decent at the pro show. And I think the overall winner got 10th. I think I saw at the
Yeah.
pro
Yeah.
lineup, and then Holly Baxter, who I believe was like what runner up to the overall for for NPC Junior Nats, she got I think like 13th. So those were the highest placing new pros at the pro
Yeah.
show.
Yeah. Yeah. I think the overall winner wasn't as conditioned as Holly, but she had better glutes. So I
Yeah.
think they both have things to work on, whereas the girls that placed ahead of them are pretty complete, and that's just a matter of structure and how they peaked, and all those things. So it was overall a really good first call out. Like the top 8 were all very good, right? So it's no slight on them. I still think, I don't know. I think Allie, because she won it last year. Had she been in this lineup, how she looked last year, I think she still would have been second, third, or fourth. She would have been in the mix, but that girl was it was her day. The naked eye test was like,
Yeah.
dude, yeah.
Yep. Agreed. Yeah, it looked like a great show. And I have to give like a little shout out. I don't know this girl's name, but I saw this on Instagram and I thought this was like miraculous. And I'm sure you saw it since you were there, Paul. I heard there was a girl, I think she was like class B maybe, who broke her foot, not at the show, but she
Yeah.
walked on stage with like and did her posing with a broken foot. She had crutches, I think, part of the time, but I think
She
she
didn't
ended
have the crutches on stage. She
up.
actually had one of the expediters kind of, I initially thought she was visually impaired because it
Okay.
looked like that she was being helped. Then we realized, we looked at her foot and we could see the wrap, and then they announced it. And she definitely got top 5. Like she was in the mix there to maybe top 4. Like she looked good.
Incredible. That's awesome.
I remember when Kimber Bonilla turned pro, she had a broken foot or a
Oh,
broken
really?
ankle. Yeah, you don't remember, she like twisted her ankle and she still competed and ended up winning. I think it was at Junior Nationals, if I'm not mistaken.
Really.
Okay. Yeah, I feel like I remember hearing that story on like a podcast I listened to with her, but yeah, that's crazy. I've broken my ankles before and I cannot imagine walking in
No.
heels. Cannot
I
imagine.
mean,
No.
to be fair, bikini is basically 2 poses. So,
True.
you know,
See, my biggest thing is I think back to when I broke my ankle the last time. And it was so swollen. I don't know how I would have fit that bad boy in a heel, like because it was like I had full on cankles, so I don't know how that would have worked.
yeah, no, she definitely was, limited in her mobility. But she had a really good physique. So I'm sure, at the end of prep, if you get hurt like that, you can still, maintain condition as long as you keep your diet and stuff in check. It's not like the physique goes away. So, you
Right.
don't want to waste that whole prep. And hopefully that heals quick, because she looked like someone that could get a pro card this season. I mean, this was judged by Sandy, Etela, and Becky, so you take some of the male judges out of there, Tyler, Bill, like things can change from show to show. I know the standard doesn't change, but we do see some tendencies. So it'll be interesting to see, with Universe, how placings go.
For sure. Yeah,
Cool.
for sure with that. Yeah, I feel like Tyler leans a little bit into conditioning more so.
I would agree with that. But I will say at this show, me and Steven were like picking placings and we pretty much agreed with everything. Like there was never a what the
Awesome.
F moment. It was like, yeah, everything was, you know, because I was thinking, the girl in the pro show that just won Toronto, well, she's the heavy favorite coming in because the judge at that show was Becky. Becky was going to be here. No, they didn't really look at her. They brought her in and, she was a little off and they just moved her right out. So, yeah, the girl that was on and had the best physique won. That was the way I saw it, when they came out. So
Good.
yeah. But overall a good day. It was cool. I don't know if you guys, how much you follow the sport, but Cameron Krieger, who is coached by Dylan Bear, gosh, 2 years ago, I think she missed her pro card 3 or 4 times by one spot. She got like second at junior nationals, third at universe, third at USA's, like just kept. And then she took the whole year off, came back and got it first try. So it was very cool
Awesome.
to see her win her class. Kelby was in that class. That was probably, in my opinion, the most competitive class. I mean, all the top 5 were really good. Kelby did get 5th. And I'm sure all those girls that are right there are going to be going to Universal. We'll be fighting for it there. But, you know, it was a very good competitive show. So it was cool to see Cameron. You know, when you go to so many shows, you make friends with all these people. It's cool to see their stories and watch them unfold.
Absolutely.
Which brings us to the 4-week freakout.
Before we
I
go,
love that name too. It's perfect.
well, I don't know. I don't know about you guys, but well, probably I feel like it's Evan and I probably experience this a little bit more than you, Paul, because I feel like we work with a lot of newer competitors. But I will tell you, like that 4-week out mark, I feel like a lot of people start to second guess themselves. They freak out when their weight hasn't moved in 2 days. They're just stressed out thinking like, oh my gosh, why am I doing this? Is it going to be worth it? Am I going to be ready?
I'll
And
put your mind at ease, Lexi. Lana Dunbar is 4 weeks out. We just had this same conversation yesterday.
really, so
Yeah,
it
of course. It's
never
not
fails.
limited. Honestly, I think anybody that really cares about their is going to have these moments, right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's important for us to talk about it because especially if I mean, whether you're a new competitor or not, I think it just helps to know these things are normal. It's not like you're an abnormality. Like these, I feel like every competitor to some extent, whether or not they want to be public about it or not, has these thoughts, has these feelings right around that like 4-week out mark. And I just say 4 weeks out because I don't know about you guys, but personally for me, I've always felt like that's the most challenging part of prep because you're so close, yet you're still kind of far. And usually that's when you're in the thick of it. Things are getting really aggressive. You're trying to push for those last couple of pounds. So personally for me, that's just where I always feel like it gets to be the hardest.
Yeah, and the truth is because if people get concerned, it's because the numbers don't change a lot. And a lot of the times that happens because food gets low, cardio gets raised, inflammation goes up. And it's one of those, wow, I'm pushing really hard here and not a lot's happening. That's what they're feeling in their minds at that point. So I understand it. Now, the more times you kind of go through this, and if you have a coach, obviously like any of us, that can kind of explain these things to you, like, hey, I expect this to happen. And I've even at points when I know this is coming, I'm like, don't expect a lot to happen this week. You're going to get upset. You're going to be bothered because stuff's probably not going to move. If it does, awesome. That is outstanding. But if it doesn't, understand everything's going to be okay because there's no way our food is here. There's no way our cardio is here. And we are not dropping body fat at this point. It is impossible to be dropping body fat at this point. And then, of course, when everything backs down, food goes up a little bit, cardio goes down, then things start to fall. Yeah, it can mess with a lot of people's minds. It really, really, really can.
Well, especially when you've been low carb for a while, I think
Mhm.
muscles are flat, digestion is slow. I mean, there's days where you flat out just look terrible, compared to how you looked a couple days ago. So I think when I talk about the difficulties of prep, most people assume it's like, oh, it must be really hard to be on the diet for that long. And I'm like, no, the hard part is when you have a bad day in the gym with strength, you're not getting a pump, you feel flat, yeah. And it's just like, you're like, man, I don't feel like I'm lean enough, but I'm also like lost all this weight. Maybe I'm losing muscle. It starts to mess with your head. And a lot of people will give up and pull out and be like, no, I was losing muscle. If you're lifting weights and eating your protein, you are not losing muscle. However, you can lose muscle fullness quickly,
Mhm.
even throughout the day. When you're shredded, your body changes by the hour.
Yep.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, that's why I think it can be fun. Even if your coach doesn't like ask for it, but towards the end of prep, taking pictures of your physique in the morning compared to later in the day, your muscles are just going to look so different, so different. But I think also like with the nature of getting deep into prep, usually you're sending check-ins more frequently to your coach. You're looking at yourself more often. You're taking progress pictures very frequently. And naturally, just the more you look at something, the more you're going to get this like very skewed perception of what you truly look like. And I kind of call it like you're going to get these foggy glasses. You're not going to be able to see yourself how you actually truly look, because I think every competitor who's competed before can attest to the fact that, you know, when you're, let's say 6 weeks post show, or not 6 weeks, 6 months post show, your body weight's kind of back to a normal level. You look back at those pictures deep into prep and you're like, oh my God, I was tiny. But then you think back to how you felt in that moment and you don't remember ever feeling that way in the moment. So you kind of just have to take what you see in the mirror and in your progress pictures with a little bit of a grain of salt when you are in the thick of it, because your brain is just not going to be able to think rationally. You're not seeing yourself clearly. And, you know, it's just not going to do any good if you're constantly hyperfixating on how you look and picking apart your flaws all the time.
Yeah, experience is a great teacher in this regard. You know, the thing that now when I'm dieting down for shows after doing them for many years, it doesn't bother me. I go, oh man, just having a crap day. I know the good days are coming. The first couple preps, I really struggled with those rough days. I would actually not look at myself. I would cover up. I learned to just, you know, only look at myself either after I worked out or after a high carb day. You know, so you learn coping mechanisms, but then also you learn over time that like it's necessary to look not your best to get to your best look. You can't, if you look great all the time, no, you're not making progress.
Nope. And that's something that kind of goes hand in hand. You'll see with a lot of competitors that they're posting a lot of pictures and they look great all the time throughout their whole entire prep. And then you see them on stage, you're like, hold up, this doesn't look like this. That happens a lot.
Well, that's because they're only taking pictures and, you know, anabolic lighting with a workout and 3 meals in, which, you know, that's great, but you're not going to be like that on stage. You don't get to train for an hour before you get on stage. So it is.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry, Paul. No, I'm sorry, Paul. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say it's very important to like learn to get lean enough and how to put your body in position to look great under stage lights. It's very different than overhead gym lighting.
And I feel like, especially when it comes to bikini competitors, and I think this is at almost all levels of it, people will get a little skewed perception of what they look like and what they feel like, especially because a lot of times I start getting like AM and PM check-in pictures, especially getting close to the end. This isn't like a 4-week out thing necessarily, but you know, in the morning, it's like, oh my God, I'm so flat. I'm so flat. I'm so flat. I'm like, well, you're supposed to be flat in the morning. And then later on in the day, after they've eaten all their meals, you know, we'll check in and they'll say, oh, my stomach is just like so full. I feel so bloated. This is horrible. Look, I'm like, well, you're never gonna go on stage with 2,000 calories in your stomach either. So let's think about that as well. This is about trying to find that medium ground for them and help them realize it's neither extreme, right? But I want to see both sides of the extreme to be able to know where to meet in the middle with it.
Yeah. So what do you do, Lexi, when you have a client in this position? What's your like, you know?
Yeah, so I guess I'll use an example. So actually something that happened this weekend. So I had a client and well, she reached out to me on Friday. I'm sure she listens to this podcast. She reached out to me on Friday. She's a first time competitor. She was having a very just really rough prep day, low energy, you know, just one of those days. And, you know, I reassured her it's pretty normal at this point. You know, we talked a little bit about some things she could tweak just with her foods and like adding in some more electrolytes. But on Saturday, basically I could tell she was still a little panicked. So we jumped on the phone and we just talked it through a little bit. And I think that a lot of times in these scenarios, like, you know, you said at the beginning, Evan, I think the hardest part for competitors is they feel like they're pushing so hard and not quite seeing anything in return, right? Like they're eating very little, they're doing so much cardio and they're not seeing their weight move and they assume that like nothing's happening, right? And they're like, well, why am I even doing this? It's not working. And so I find that 9 times out of 10, just jumping on a phone call with somebody, even if it's for 5-10 minutes, and just talking through things, reassuring them, hey, this is normal. If I am as your coach, I'm not worried, you should not be worried, right? And also I like hopping on the phone if I can too, because you've said this before, Paul, but you can sometimes hear it in people's voices. Like if they're truly miserable, like you will hear it in the tone of their voice, right?
Mhm.
You'll be able to pick up on it. But sometimes you hear them and you're like, oh, you're fine. You were just having a moment yesterday. So I like to hop on the phone with somebody if I can, or just text them, send voice memos, reassure them like this is normal, I promise. And more oftentimes than not, they'll wake up the next day, they'll feel like a completely different person, and they'll be like, oh, I'm sorry, I feel like I was overreacting, or you were right, I feel so much better today. So that's generally the approach I take.
And a lot of the times, the truth is they do look worse during this time frame. Like they do,
Mhm.
right? Because you look inflamed, you look flat. It's just not really the best look. And and that does mess with people. It absolutely does mess with people.
Yeah. And I also do tell my girls, especially, I mean, I think this can just apply for all the time, but especially when you're like 4 or less weeks out, filter what you will choose to see on social media, right? Like, don't get on social media, fall down a rabbit hole, start finding girls who are maybe the same amount of time out as you. I've even seen it before, like with new amateur competitors that are always looking at pros and they're comparing
Mm.
how they look to pros. And it's like, well, okay, that's great that you're looking at the pros, but use that as motivation and realize you're not going to be competing against them, right? Like you're comparing apples to oranges there. So I think really limiting your social media usage, or just what you choose to see on social media when you're close to show day, because looking at people when they take pictures mid pump in the gym, like that's only going to get in your head. And also, as a bikini competitor, you have to realize too that the coolest physique off stage is not always going to be the one that's rewarded on stage. And I think that gets in a lot of people's head too when they're looking at other fellow competitors on Instagram.
Yeah, you want to compare yourself against yourself, right? Like I've had conversations with this multiple times over the last few weeks because I have a lot of competitors competing in the next few weeks. And it's like, well, I just feel like I don't look like this. I don't feel like I look like this. I'm like, you've literally been doing this a year and you're comparing yourself against people that have been doing this 5, 6, 7 years. Like you have to think about that. You have to think about that. Like, there is no fast forward button we can do to muscle maturity. It's just not something we can hit. It just takes time. It takes consistency. And what we're bringing is the best we can possibly bring. And trying to help everyone or trying to help people understand, we're worried about bringing your personal best with that is what we're trying to do. Then we can take and make improvements because of that. But just because you're like, I want bigger glutes towards the end of prep. Sorry, you kind of got what we got at this point. We're trying to bring the best out of that, right? And setting those expectations are really helpful. And I always try to set those expectations beforehand, and not in a negative way, but in a positive way, so they understand, because they're gonna find out, right? If it's a competitive class, they're gonna find out. And I would rather them know upfront with it, kind of where I think we are and what we can kind of expect, and then go from there. And that helps a lot of people just go into the shows with, feeling a little bit more relaxed on it. And then if everything goes according to plan, awesome, right? That's great. That's exactly what we want.
Yeah, I also I will use so first things first about this 4 week out, 6 week out period. Your coach should empathize with you, right? If they brush
Mhm.
you off, that's a problem, right? There should be a level of, hey, I understand what's going on. I got your back. Let's do this. I will often use this time to my advantage. If someone's like, hey, can I be doing more? I may not have them doing the max amount that I feel they could be doing because things are going well. And I'll say, hey, if you're feeling behind, let's just go all in for a couple weeks, right? So I'll, you know, a competitor who is worried, I'll use that to my advantage. I'll be like, hey, I think we're on the right track, but there's no problem with pushing harder and being ready a week or two earlier. So, that's kind of the way, I've learned to handle my own preps. I was like, man,
Mhm.
I'm feeling a kind of way. You know what? I'm just going to get after it for a couple days and see what happens, right? So I'll use that to my advantage, and I'll always try to empathize with them. I'll also say, hey, would it be better if we did a different show, right? Sometimes the show date is what's causing the stress. However, sometimes the show date is also what's causing them to kick ass. So, it's a double-edged sword. You don't want to always have the option to do another show and another show, because then you might never get to that place where you really push yourself hard. So this is where coaching psychology is very important. Um, and also knowledge as a coach, being at shows, knowing listen, everyone listening to this podcast, write this down, get your paper out. We know your update pictures don't look like what you actually look like. However, we've been doing this long enough. We know the difference between what looks good in update pictures and what looks good on stage. And the key is when you look great in crap light, that's when you're show ready. That's it. So we're going to push you to be ready even in bad lighting. Now that doesn't mean like you might not look great in update pictures and you might look really good on stage, but a truly shredded competitor, they can be in a direct ring light and you're still going to see their tie-ins. You're still going to see their core is etched. You're still going to see everything. So, but that's that next level shredded physique that looks truly spectacular under the lights.
So if you look good in bad lighting, you look good, great in good lighting, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then that's something too, we don't, and this isn't necessarily a 4-week out mark where the thing is, we want good update pictures. We want good progress pictures. Do not fixate on them. Take them and send them. Don't fixate on them, please. Please don't fixate on them.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because this is a rule I started to have with myself at the end of my last prep, is like, take your pictures, take them once or twice, make sure the lighting, everything looks good, your poses look, how they should, and then send them, because you can fall into that rabbit hole of fixating on them, picking apart your flaws, saying, all right, let me take a new set. Oh, I don't like this. Okay, let me take a new set. And like, that does nobody good. And that's why also, like, a little side note to kind of caveat on that, a lot of times I'll tell girls, like, when they're, when they're getting close to their show day, don't like practice your posing for more than like increments of 15 minutes at a time, because a lot of times when you go beyond that amount of time, you're going to just start to make these minor slip ups and get in your head, and it's going to become frustrating. But that's a great point about the pictures. Like, take them once or twice, make sure the lighting is good, make sure your poses are how they need to be, and send them. Don't like hyperfixate on things that you don't like.
Yeah, don't hyperfixate on, I can tell you what most of them hyperfixate on is, don't hyperfixate on your core, please. Just don't. Make sure your angles are correct. That's the thing to think about with checking pictures. Make sure your angles are correct. Get those feet up, right? Ground up. Get those angles right. Don't send a check-in picture where your stomach looks the best or whatever you feel like it looks the best. I know all you guys get the same thing, right? Where I will get, our check-in system allows for a certain amount of pictures, and then they'll send other pictures. Well, here's another one I think it looks better, and I'll literally put them side to side and be like, there is no difference between any of these pictures.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
They can see something no one else can see.
Right. Or don't, I don't think I have clients that do this. I'm just throwing it out there because I'm sure there's been people out there who have thought to do this. Like, don't mess with the filter lighting when you take your pictures. Like, I think we're at the point where most people are not editing their actual pictures, like editing their body, but don't mess with the lighting. Like the iPhone has the feature where you can draw the lighting, like you can make it warmer, colder, whatever. Like, just don't do that, because that's not gonna help your case. Like, if anything, if the lighting makes your physique look very different than it actually looks, and your coach sees that, well, that could be potentially holding you back too as an athlete.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to hit the color correction, like the auto correction on there, feel free to do that. That doesn't matter with that stuff, but don't mess with the lighting, please. And I'll be honest, there's some clients I've had in the past that I'm like, something ain't right here with this. No, I didn't mess with anything with that. Okay, go ahead and send me a video then, please. Like, I want videos next time with it. Yeah. And we'll see, right? We'll see. We'll see kind of what's going on with it. And sometimes it is, sometimes it's not, right? With that. But it's, everyone wants to try to look their best. And the way I've always rationalized it is they don't want to let themselves down. They don't want to let us down, right? They don't want that. And a lot of times they take a check-in pictures like, oh, I'm going to adjust this because I look better than I do in these check-in pictures. These check-in pictures don't do me justice with that. But kind of like you said, Paul, we already know that.
Well, I mean, the best you're going to look as a competitor is typically after a higher carb day, which is going to allow the muscles to fill out. And so what I'll typically say, if someone's feeling some kind of way, oh, I'm only this, I'll say, listen, why don't you take a posing video on your high carb day or the day after, right after you work out, and let's just see what we see, because that's going to be closer to what we look like on stage. You're not going to be completely run down. You're not going to be completely depleted. You're not going to be doing double cardio the day of the show or the day before. So I try to give them some tools on how to see themselves properly. Find some, hey, if you want, find some overhead lighting. So I try to find ways to like boost their confidence Because yeah, I mean, as a competitor, myself, yeah, I've learned just to deal with it and go, yep, I'm just having one of those days. Don't look. Um, but that's something that new competitors, even experienced competitors who have seen themselves a certain way and they're waiting for that look to come back, it can throw them. And especially when you're, low carb, run down, inflamed, um, it's it's a part of the process that makes the sport tougher because it's the psychology. We can all endure the diet and the training and the cardio, but can you endure the mental side? That's really, I think, for most of us, the challenge.
Oh yeah,
That's
I
why
would.
I got competing initially, was that it was to look good. That was one of the first parts, but because I wanted to challenge myself mentally with it. That's the best part about this whole sport.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious. So I want to hear from you guys and I'll share mine too. So what do you guys, when you're just having one of those days, like 3, 4 weeks out, where you are just like dead to the world, like you're a zombie, you feel awful, like what do you guys have any things like that you do or anything like that you tell yourself inner dialogue wise to help you to get through those days? Because I think we all endure those at least a couple times in prep. I know I do. So I'm curious what you guys do to like get through those days.
Embrace it. Embrace it. Know that if you feel like that, you're getting close to ready. Just like hunger. For hunger's how you frame it. I can tell you, if you go through a whole prep and you're not hungry, you think you're going to be peeled on stage. Maybe once in a blue moon, you get someone like that. You're going to have to be really hungry a lot of the time to truly be peeled on stage. And I learned to embrace that. Be like, okay, this is what I asked for. I wanted to be peeled. This is part of getting peeled. And the same thing with that, the energy, the brain fog, that's all going to be part of it. It's all going to be part of it. If you be ready, that's going to be part of it.
Yeah, I will say, the way I think of prep in my brain, it's like a funnel, right? And at the beginning of prep, I've got more variability in food sources, more variability in moving time, meal timing, more variability in my schedule. And as you get closer and closer to stage, there's less and less variability. So I'll notice, while I'm not someone that's like, oh, you need to eat every 3 hours but at the end of prep, it becomes more important, your meal timing. It's going to impact your mood, your blood sugar, your training performance. So I'll become more regimented with meal timing, with going to bed on time, with what time I go to the gym. I get a little bit more anal about like my desk being clear. I like to have anything that's going to cause me stress or anxiety to have all that done. I mean, laundry, my car is cleaner. I'm really weird at the end of prep where I'm so anal and I'm usually so laid back. So I think it's just my way of controlling the controllables and knowing that I'm doing everything in my power. Whereas at the beginning of prep, when I've got 20 pounds to lose, listen, I don't got to be perfect, right? My energy's not going to come and go and my mood's not going to come and go. But at the end of prep, when you're, 6, 7, whatever percent body fat, a lot's going to depend on those things. So that's when I start to get a little bit more particular about how I handle my day. I'll probably say no to more things, and I'll just be a lot more regimented. And that really helps me with my like confidence.
Yeah, I like that. I think the biggest thing I've learned is that like like you said, Evan, to embrace the tough days. For me, I don't think it's ever really hunger that bugs me because I don't care. I can deal with hunger, but it's always like that fatigue, or even not even just hunger, but sometimes just like the food focus thoughts. Those can really drive me nuts towards the end of prep. But I think that I've always just learned to realize, okay, whenever I'm having a day like that, it's probably just going to be a day. I'm probably going to go to bed, wake up the next day and feel completely different for no apparent reason, but completely different in a good way. And honestly, I always feel like you have to have those really, really low days in order to appreciate just the normal days a lot more. Because like what other time are you going to wake up on a normal day and like be like, oh my God, like I feel normal, right? But it's because we have those really, really low days that we appreciate the normal days that much more. And I was just trying to remind myself too, like, okay, if this sport was remotely easy, everybody would be doing it. And there's a reason that, we are the 0.05% of the population that does this, right? So that's kind of just how I try to frame it, is just knowing it's temporary and knowing that I'm probably going to wake up the next day and feel completely different. But I'm also a big sucker for like my sleep times too. That makes a difference.
Mhm.
Yeah, that is probably the thing that pulls me out of prep. There's definitely a point of prep where I'm like, man, I could do this all year. And then you hit that, no matter what you do, 2, 3 o'clock every day, your energy level just dips. You can't concentrate. And that becomes fatiguing in itself, right? So that, and then, food restriction. So there definitely comes a point where you're loving it. And then you're like, okay, I can do this for a little bit longer. But yeah, that for me is, especially as a coach, my priority is not my competition career. Last year I did a show in June and I thought, okay, I'll do show in June and I'll do one in August. I did the show in June and I was like, you know what? No, I'm done. I need to go. I need to focus on other things a little bit more. And I don't care who you are. If you are actually stage lean, you are not at 100% in other areas of your life. You're just not. Like it's just not possible. So you just gotta, what's your primary focus? So that's the fatiguing part for me. I think I love the process of prep more than competing. And I think some people like competing more. They love the stage so much. I get on stage as a result and to like drive myself, but I love the process way more than I love that stage day.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like just how, and I have a great example. I had a client who's a first-time competitor tell me something this week. It was really pivotal for her. She gave up like a really bad habit, that she had like been doing for I think a long time now. And she told me specifically, she's like, Lexi, prep allowed me to do this because I find that personally, and I think this a lot of people can resonate with this, like prep teaches you very much so discipline with your food, with the gym, with all that. But I find that discipline transpires into other areas of life, right? It teaches you what you are capable of doing, and you can kind of let that bleed into other areas of your life. Like you said, Paul, no, you're not going to usually be your 100% best at every other, variable in your life when you're in the dick or in the that was bad. That was and when you're in the depth of prep, but it can definitely teach you discipline that I think can transpire into other areas of your life for sure.
Yeah. I'll always say it. Bodybuilding changed my life for the better. When people are like, oh, bodybuilding isn't healthy, I'm like, have you done it?
Mm-hmm.
You've gone through a prep? I think you're talking about being on stage. You might not be your healthiest, but I promise you're going to come out of that, especially if you do it the right way. You're going to come out of it a better person, and have some tools and time management skills and things that you wouldn't have had otherwise, and learn to put yourself first. And, yeah, I think it's been life-changing for me. And I hear that from many, many people. So it's not just a, self-fulfilling prophecy, but I look at the person I was before I ever did a bodybuilding show and, the person I am now, and it's changed me for the better. And last year I decided I wasn't going to have a drink for a whole year. No reason. I don't drink that often. I don't drink hard. I don't have a problem with alcohol, but I said, you know what, why don't I just take a year off of drinking? And I actually loved it. So I'll probably do it again next time I compete. Cause I don't think of prep as 12 weeks or 16 weeks. I think the years that I compete, I'm just going to use that as a year to go all in on the sport. And then I'll take a couple of years off, from that aspect, but the training, the diet, that doesn't change that much. But yeah, so I think some people use the sport potentially to like cover up another addiction, right? They're like, okay, I was having this problem and now, having this problem. And it can be problematic. And that's why we have Danica and some mindset coaches on staff, people that deal with those things. But if at 4 weeks out, you're dealing with some of these things, a coach with experience is going to be able to explain to you why. And that's the thing that I want to stress, is that don't ever let a coach shut you down and tell you that your feelings aren't valid because you feel like you're behind or you feel like run down. No, these are conversations you need to be having, and, and helping them understand that these are very normal feelings. You should feel at times like, man, I feel like crap and I feel like I look like crap. And I always tell girls when they're like, oh man, I was looking at these girls look really good. And I go, yeah, that's what's going to make you not miss a workout, not miss your meals, like get to bed on time, because how good these girls, how much effort they're putting in, or these guys, like it's a competition. So, You don't want to get on stage being like, man, I could have just done a little more.
Yeah.
It's a competition. You're competing against other people.
Yeah.
You're competing.
Yeah.
And like you said, Paul, I do think that it is important. If you are having these kind of feelings at, let's say 4 weeks out, you're feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be ready, or oh my gosh, I feel so, so awful, or whatever it is. Don't be afraid to, vocalize that to your coach, and they're going to do their best to explain to you what's normal, what isn't, and why you're feeling the way you feel. And I think that can help too. And it's not, I think sometimes a lot of clients fear telling their coach like, oh, I'm really struggling, I'm really having a hard time, or oh, I don't think we're going to be ready. And it's not a bad thing to open up to your coach about that. If anything, they're going to just reassure you and put your mind at ease, right? And like stop all that mental bad dialogue that you're having. So I think it is important to ask questions. Your coach should be able to explain, and your coach should also be able to explain what we talked about at the beginning of this video too, about how, or at the beginning of this podcast, of how you have to usually kind of get to that point where you're not looking so great, you're flat, you're depleted. Like you have to look that way at some point in prep to adequately fill out and go into show day too. So it's important to understand that.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, one last thing I wanted to just scratch the surface with. We could do a whole other podcast episode on this, but what do you guys typically tell clients? Because I feel like this is a very common one. Some deal with it, more than others, but when they're, when somebody's in a thick of prep and they're pushing really hard and food's low, cardio's high, stress is high on the body, and their digestion slows, do you guys have anything that you kind of like prescribe or tell your clients to do to help with digestion besides just like general refeeds that generally help with that? But is there anything else that you guys usually tell your clients that come to you with that?
I think
Yeah.
the first thing to know is that when you've lost a lot of body fat, you've been dieting for a while, your calories are probably below maintenance because you're trying to get leaner, your cardio is quite high, you're training, your body gets very efficient. So if you are having 1 to 2 bowel movements a day in the off season, it's not uncommon to not have a bowel movement every single day in prep. And girls will say, oh, coach, I'm bloated, I haven't gone to the bathroom for 2 days. And I go, well, are you bloated? Are you feeling any discomfort? Well, no, I just haven't gone. Okay, well, this is a normal part of prep. Like, this is why we do the refeeds. This is why we take diet breaks. But your body gets very efficient. It actually slows digestion down. So your body gets more efficient, which sounds like it would be a good thing, but it's not a good thing for fat loss because your body is actually extracting more calories from the same amount of food at the end of prep. So it slows down that process. So imagine the food stays with you longer. Any food that's in contact with your body longer that you may have a slight allergy to now is in contact with your digestive system a little bit longer. Those allergies may become a little bit more prominent. You might get more bloating. So then you can start looking at dietary habits, fiber intake, FODMAP things, the things that are most commonly going to cause. And then you can start to like pull and, this is where, like I said, at the beginning of prep, I'm eating out, I'm doing all these things. By the end of prep, I've figured out the 10 foods that are just, I'm humming. And I don't want that variability in digestive rate and sodium. And I don't want that variability. I know if I eat something that's going to throw me off the next day, it's going to bug me. So I don't want that. So this is where you can have this conversation. Like, yes, we talk about the idea of macro-based prepping, but you're still on a meal plan as a bodybuilder for your best look. So this is where we can go, okay, what are we eating on a daily basis? And we'll look over, your meals and potentially even help you set up a meal plan, because you want to eliminate these variables. But yeah, it just depends the conversation, Lexion. Is it actually a problem or is it just a perceived problem?
Yes.
Right. The perception is key there. And I found too that the people like stressing about it doesn't help either, because a lot of times digestion is going to slow when you're stressing about something or when stress is higher. And so like cognitively, if you're stressing over the fact that, oh my God, I haven't gone to the bathroom today, and like you're hyperfixating on it, you're stressing about it, it's probably not going to happen, right? It's like, doesn't help in that standpoint either. But you're right, Paul, it really can be a perception thing.
Man, if somebody's actually bloated or constipated and can't go to the restroom with it, I mean, there's obviously things that you can do about that. I think like magnesium citrate's a really helpful thing for that, especially if you can get the powdered form of it, somewhere between like 300, 500 milligrams. A lot of times can get everything kind of moving a little bit. It's not something I would want to do every single night, but it's something that will kind of help if you are actually backed up. Like if you haven't gone to the bathroom and you have a lot of stomach pain, then obviously we need to do something about that. But if you just haven't gone to the bathroom in a few days, and a lot of time this goes back to what we we're talking about before, when people worry about their weight on a scale and that's not moving. And then they're not going to the restroom. Like, oh, the reason my weight isn't moving is because I haven't gone to the bathroom. Well, correlation does not equal causation when it comes to this sort of thing. A lot of time you just had the weight hasn't gone down because the inflammation is up in there, not having anything to do with the food. Now, with that being said, if you've got away with a lot of eating maybe some higher processed foods throughout this whole process on there, and now you're having an issue going to the restroom, then yeah, maybe we need to pull some of that processed stuff out to help everything kind of, be more efficient in the body. Let's not put up roadblocks at this point with digestion. Let's not do that. Let's stay away from those. Let's clear those out and make sure if we do have an issue, it can pass through. So that's just a few things we look at.
Yeah. And one last little key point on that too with the foods is you kind of started to mention this, Evan, but taking out like when you're deep into prep and your food gets really low, I think we all have a tendency to sometimes add in a little bit more like volume, right? It's not necessarily processed food, but just more volume, more vegetables, cruciferous veggies, rice cakes. And so sometimes tapering those things down too, even though it's going to make you a little bit hungrier, that can help with digestion. Because if you're pounding a ton of broccoli, a ton of like just veggies in every meal, that can cause your stomach to feel super bloated. And that can kind of cause that like discomfort in your abdomen or that like distended lower stomach.
Yeah, and it will do that. It will do that. Like Paul was talking about with the FODMAP, right? And so some of that I think, we can go back and forth on that with it, but things like cruciferous vegetables, but there's a reason that most people don't have those on peak week, right? It's because they will sit in your stomach. They do make you feel. Why does something make you feel full? Because it's not really digested. That's why. That's why if you have something like tuna or whitefish, we're talking about that, how you're hungry an hour after that because it is literally just passed through your system. It's digested. It's already through your system with that. No one's eating, some whitefish and then satisfied for the next 3 hours. You're hungry right after that. Now you eat that and a ton of broccoli, then yeah, things are gonna slow down just a little bit with that. So it's that chasing of feeling full. If you chase that feeling full, yeah, you are chasing your digestion slowing as well. Not always, but in some cases.
Especially before you go to bed too. Like if you're
Yeah.
chasing that like extreme fullness right before you go to bed and you're in the depths of prep and you're going to probably wake up in the morning still with that food in your stomach, weight's going to be up, you're going to be frustrated. So I mean, don't get me wrong, years and years ago I definitely used to be that person that would eat a lot like at the nighttime because I was like had that weird fear of being hungry before I went to bed. But now like when I'm in prep, I love going to bed with like a little bit of hunger, nothing crazy, nothing intense to the point where it's like I can't fall asleep, but just to feel kind of like empty and not feel full. Like I love going to bed with that feeling because usually I can kind of gauge, okay, I'm going to wake up, I'm going to feel extra good, extra tight, extra lean, and probably see a new low.
Yeah, it's funny. I think one of the telltale signs for me, just from the experience of prep, knowing when I'm damn lean is when I eat a meal and I'm hungrier after.
Yep.
There is you almost don't want to eat because you're like, oh, I'm not that hungry right now. As soon as I eat this meal, I'm gonna be starving. And the common feedback I get with clients that I give them refeeds is, coach, I don't like the refeeds. Why? Because I'm starving. It's like you turn on these hunger signals, but that's also kicking on the other hormones that are going to speed up fat loss. And so like a lot of times the refeeds will actually speed up digestion. They'll turn on some hormones and you'll actually just drop weight. I have clients that literally don't drop weight until they do a refeed. They kind of maintain all week on the low calories. The refeeds kick off the scale dropping for a couple days, and then they go back on the low calories. And they think, why don't we just do refeeds all the time? I'm like, well, that's not when you're losing body fat. That's just when it's showing up on the scale. But yeah, hunger is, I think for those of us that compete, we're sick in the head. If I'm not hungry at the end of prep, I'm like, something's wrong. Like, what did I do today where I'm not hungry? Did I track something wrong? So like,
Or it's the like this is the opposite of that, but like when you start to reverse out of a show and your hunger levels are more maintained and like you actually feel satisfied and like full. Sometimes I see people confusing just normal fullness with like, oh, I'm bloated. And it's like, you're not bloated. You're just you're full. You're satisfied. You've
Oh,
been
I say that all the time to my girls on show day. They're like, "Oh, I feel bloated." And I'm like, "Now, listen, are you burping? Are you passing gas? Are you farting? No. Okay. Do you just not remember what it feels like to not be starving?" And they're like, "You know what?" I'm like, "Because I'm looking at, I can see your abs. You're not bloated." But
yeah,
yeah, it's the
remember
psychological feeling.
I remember in Pittsburgh, Brittany Hamilton was like one day out. You were checking her in the hotel room, and I'll never forget. She was like, "Yeah, I just feel really bloated, kind of watery," and we were both just like looking at her like, "What? You don't look one bit watery or bloated." But okay,
Yeah,
Yeah.
here's two things I think that can help a lot of people, and this is like kind of inside baseball stuff here with it. Eating a lot of here's a big thing about eating before you go to bed. If you are kind of stuck at a weight and you feel like your digestion's not that great, you know what will speed that up? Go walk for 10 minutes after you eat a meal. Move. Eat,
Yeah.
then go walk. You will be shocked at how much it improves your digestion and how it will actually end up in not increasing fat loss, but it just speeds everything up a little bit more and gets everything moving. You can't just kind of sit there. Once you move a little bit, your digestion will pick up. So if you eat a bunch of damn food, especially cruciferous, especially a big volume, and then you go to bed, how do you think that's going to act on your digestion? If moving after eating speeds it up, how do you think eating a bunch and sitting is going to do? It's going to do the opposite of that, right? And a big thing we look at with refeeds, at least I do with it, is I think all of us, we do somewhat similar to where we'll push and have some refeeds kind of generally worked in to start with it. And I will know when things are humming, when after that refeed that we have, when we know we've hit that sweet spot, when after those little bit of a higher days, the weight doesn't go up or it goes down. I'm like, okay, now we're cooking. Now everything's firing. Because to begin with in a prep, if we have food a little bit low and they have a refeed day, the weight's not going to fall. It's going to go up a little bit in the vast majority of cases. Now we'll end up lower at the overall end of the week with it, but it's how I at least determine, okay, now we're on the right track here. And now everything's kind of humming along. Now that's what we call like flip the switch, right? And now everything is really just cooking to where we need it to go. So that's something to kind of think about too as a competitor. So when you have a refeed and then your weight literally falls the next day, shit's good. Shit's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, I mean, honestly, this is why I love the diet break. And so, I mean, even at 4 weeks out, even if I have a client that's stuck and we haven't dropped in a week or two and or 4 weeks out, I may use a diet break. You know, it just restores digestion, it restores energy, it restores a lot of things that are going to allow the body to move forward. And when you've been dieting for a long time, it's counterintuitive. The body is different at the end of prep than it is at the beginning of prep. So, you know, I used to get a lot of pushback, but coach, we're 4 weeks out and I still need to lose 4 pounds. You sure? I don't feel like I've earned this. And I'm like, this is not about earning it. This is about looking the best you can look on stage. And that's not always about just how much you can survive, how little you can eat and how much you can do. Sometimes it's about putting your body in a position to allow it to move forward, to allow it to make progress. It's, you know, it's why, to be quite honest, we're good at our jobs, and why when you hire a guy at a local gym to do a prep for you, and every time you hit a sticking point, you just do more cardio and less calories to the point where at the end of prep, you're on 700 calories and 3 hours of cardio. That's why. That's why that they don't coach competitors, and that's why you will fail with that coach, because they don't have the tools and the experience that, you know, like we have. Yeah,
if
I
it
just had
was if it was as easy as decreasing macros and upping cardio every time you hit a sticking point, everybody would be a coach, or nobody would need a coach, right? But
Right.
it's not that simple.
right.
Hey, look, that's needed, right? A lot of times, yes, it's increased cardio and dropping food. Yes, but it reaches a point there, and I've had these conversations a lot. Paul, you were talking earlier about using it to your advantage when competitors want to push harder, right? So I have one of the clients I'm working with right now, and we're a few weeks out from a show, and she was like, I want to push harder. I'm like, we don't need to push harder on the diet. Your food's already in place right now to where we're going to get diminishing returns. I was like, but if you feel up for it this week, then you could do like 1.5 times your cardio, maybe double cardio here for these 2 days. It's like, but be careful with this, because if you do, the output's going to be high and your hunger is really going to be up here with that. And then sometimes what happens is you have to, and this is what I worry about with that, is saying, hey, let's press this. If they want to press it with it, is for people that haven't been in this that long, that will really drive up fatigue and it will really drive up hunger, and then they'll fall off. They'll fall off plan. And so it's about trying to manage that and knowing the client. And that's why I like working with clients longer, is I'll have the conversation with them and saying, I don't want to do this. We could do this, but I'm worried this is going to happen if we do this because of the patterns that's happened in the past. So if you decide to do this, then we do not need this other thing to happen off the backside of it, because this is going to eliminate the whole thing. It's going to cause more inflammation. It's going to cause more issues with that. So it's about trying to find that median and knowing when you're going to get diminishing returns. And for every person, that is a different athlete. I have one girl that's rolling into a peak week right now. Now, granted, she's a shorter girl, under 100 pounds right now. Her food has been low for a while, and her hunger is non-existent. She's tired, but has almost no hunger.
Sometimes that almost worries me, Evan, when people are like, they put their hunger down as a 1, and I'm like,
Yep.
Are you sure that's not a good sign?
It's a conversation I've had with her, but what we're doing now is keeping the food where it is, because she's not hungry, and just backing down on all the movement, and everything is just falling through the floor right now, which is the process of how we need to do it. But it's about learning each individual and finding out what works for each individual. This is a weird case to where the food's at a point, it's not abusively low, but it's low, like it's low.
Right.
And some people can just handle that. Now there's been times hunger's gone up for sure, right? But it's typically, if someone's food is low,
have to
I do worry
recalibrate
about
too.
the
I
hunger.
have a competitor in prep right now, and she's close to that 90-pound mark. And it's like, sometimes I'm looking at our numbers, I'm like, yeah, but she's only 90 pounds. So like, you're like, man, she's only on 120 protein. But I'm like, wait, that's a lot. She's 90 pounds. So
it's like, oh, she's only at like 75 grams of carbs. Well, she's 90 pounds too.
Right.
And we got to kind of look at those situations with that. Is 75 carbs low for anybody? Yeah, it's low for anybody, right? It is. But who am I to say, hey, never mind, you don't need this because we're moving in the right direction. You're literally not hungry.
Right.
So just making sure everything is fine with that. And that's why like being individual is so helpful. And after we did the podcast last week, I've had a few people message me saying, hey, I'm part of a gym, and they coach a bunch of people in the gym, and they're on that exact plan as every single other person. And I feel bad for these people because they pay a lot of money up front and then are just kind of stuck there, right?
I had a consult after the show. One of the pro competitors DM'd me and was like, hey, can we meet for coffee tomorrow? I was like, yeah, sure. And I was like, what's going on? She's like, well, I was at a show with my teammate last week, and I'm under 100 pounds and she's way over 100 pounds, and we're on the same exact plan and the same exact peak week and the same exact everything. And I was like, oh yeah, of course. And it was like 13 fat and 180 protein, basically what we talked about the other day. And it's like, yep. So, I think it helps that we're raising awareness, because my goal is to put more information in the hands of the athletes so that they can ask better questions and be advocates for themselves. And, perhaps if it makes sense, coaches reach out to us for help, or, want some assistance in how to do things. Or we've got 26 coaches who are capable of, if you're a coach and you're not willing to put in the work, we'll put in the work for you. We'll get your athletes better. So, it is nice when I travel to these shows and I hear feedback from our podcasts and things that we talk about, because to me, it's important to just have these conversations. And here's the thing. I've never had a client come to me and ask me a question and shot them down and been like, do you know how many girls I have at the Olympia? Don't question me. Like, what good is that? What does that do? Nothing. If you, this is my favorite saying now, if your coach is afraid to answer a question, it's because he doesn't know the answer, and you're challenging him and you're threatening them, he or her, like, it just, that's why.
I had somebody, I think they told me this before we recorded last week, but somebody who sent in a meal plan, and it was very low fat, and she had said that she had actually asked her coach like about the fats, like why were they so low, and her coach came back with why are you so obsessed with fats? Like, well, that's
Exactly.
yeah, they clearly don't have an answer, so
Do you need to go look up what fat does for our body? Talk about messing up your digestion. Don't eat fat. See how good your
Mhm.
digestion is. See how good your hormones are. See how
That
good your post-show rebound is.
it's a diminishing returns factor, right? It is.
Yeah.
And I can tell this, I coach a fair amount of coaches too.
Yeah.
And I have a lot of respect for those coaches because they realize they want to learn. They want to get better at what they do.
Oh, that's my
And
favorite aspect of
it's
this.
great. It is great. And look, like you don't know what you don't know on things. And there's certain people that think, and I in this day and age, I don't understand how, but they think, hey, this is just the way it needs to be done with that. When no, it's not. And the simple to be a coach, you need more than a base level understanding of nutrition. If you do not, you should not coach because you are impacting people's lives. You're impacting their health, and they are leaning on you for that. And it just look. I know we've all done this. I've had some clients that, and I had a conversation the other day with one where I was like, hey, listen, we're not going to be as tight as we need to go for this show. We're going to be very good. We're going to be close. We're not going to quite be there, but I'm also not going to push you any harder than we're already pushing you because it will not do us any good. Not because I don't want to, but it's literally going to do us no good.
Right.
None. Nothing. Like, look at our calorie set, look where our output's at, look where we need to go. We cannot get there. It doesn't matter what we do. We can't. And understanding that is helpful because then what's the option? Literally push them to no food and 3 hours of cardio. And so they barely just shuts down. They don't get there anyways. And they feel horrible and their rebound's horrible.
yeah,
That's not an option either.
no.
Best play on the chessboard. That's what it's about.
Yeah. Well, anything else that you guys want to say about the 4 week out freak out?
Um, I mean, I always, the way I like to end this conversation is your feelings are valid. Use it to your benefit. Doesn't mean they're right. Doesn't mean they're wrong. It just means like if you're feeling a certain way, get to the root of it. You know, if I'm having clients that are really questioning how they're looking, I'm going to say, hey, you want to see what we're actually going to look like on stage? Let's bring food up and cardio down for a couple days. If we don't feel like we look good, hey, more motivation to push harder. So it's a conversation that you should be willing to have. Sometimes the answer is, you know what, we're on schedule or we're where we need to be. We just got to keep going. The hard days are the days where the scale is up, you didn't get enough sleep, you're putting in the work, the scale hasn't dropped, and you're just like, okay, am I actually making progress? Progress, the body can change so drastically. Understand that progress isn't dictated by what's happening on the scale or what's happening in the mirror. Sometimes it's just the day that you're in it. And a lot can change with a day off, a good night's sleep, getting some stress, avoid moving, getting married, changing jobs, these giant life stressors, if
Yep.
possible. Because I'll say this, the leaner you are, the closer you are to stage weight, the more that stuff is going to impact you.
Absolutely. Amen. Well,
I think that's good for today.
I think it is as well. I have to just comment though, we did get a lot of, so it's Tuesday, so it's only been out for a day, but our last episode about the meal plans, so far we've gotten a lot of people commenting on that video on YouTube. So it definitely stirred up a lot of good conversation.
Yeah, and I'm getting a lot of comments either at the shows or direct messages. And I'll say this, I've been pleasantly surprised. I've had a few people like, Coach, what do you think of this meal plan? And I go, okay, let me look it over. Okay, what are the macros at? And I've been like, hey, this is, for where you're at, this is good. I've also been disgusted. So a meal plan, I want to make sure we make this clear. Meal plans are not inherently bad.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
are designed for you and not just copy pastas where everyone's getting the same one on the team, or, every time something happens, you're just getting a new meal plan, but it's not specific to you. That's where we run into problems. So yeah, it's not necessarily a bad thing. And in fact, I think you should be on a meal plan, but I don't think that if you're asking the question or you're afraid to ask, here's a fun one. Message a few girls on your team.
Mhm.
My girls can talk to each other all they want. I tell them backstage, I go, I want you guys to compare peak week plans. Because that's one of the more, you know what? Have we done a peak week episode?
No, we haven't. Actually, you know
so.
what? That would be really fun to do. We could either do one talking about like our peak week methods, or we could do one like we did last week with like the horrible meal plans. We could always have people write in if they feel like
Oh,
they
I got a good peak week plan the
that,
other day. Yeah.
that could be fun to see some of
It
these
was
different peak weeks.
I told the girl, I said, if you follow this plan, you will look the worst you've ever looked on show day. It's literally like, you look great. Let's just take in 3 gallons of water for 3 days and then cut it off and then pull all your sodium and eat only chicken. I was like, what? What is
Oh
the
my
goal here?
gosh. And the thing that baffles me is not all the time, but like I had a client recently tell me about a girl backstage that she met who had something like that. And I asked her, I'm like, well, how did that girl look? Like, did she look amazing on stage? And my client was like, I mean, she looked fine, but didn't do well. And it's funny because I feel like people who usually go to those drastic measures usually just they're not ready in general and they don't look the
Mhm.
best. So
I mean, if you're given a copy paste peak week, I'm sure you were given a copy paste prep plan,
Yeah.
and you're not going to get a post show reverse.
Nope.
You're not going to get, it's just a mindset. Like, the coaches just aren't good coaches. They're not doing the best that they can for their athletes. They're either worried about getting another athlete, or it's a side gig, or they just don't know any better. I don't know. I was very fortunate that I came into this sport with eyes wide open and really was very particular about who I wanted to work with, and it paid off. I still remember my first prep. I was prepping, and there was a guy in the gym that everyone knew. He was the local like NPC, like overall bodybuilding champion. He was, he had a really good physique. And I remember him like being like, I used him for posing, and he would always ask me about my diet and always ask me about my cardio. And he would be like, no, you can't. I remember one time I came to pose at his house and I was eating baked Lays. Why not? They fit my macros, right? They're like 30 carb and 4 fat. And he's like, you're eating potato chips and prep. And I was like, well, they're not regular potato chips. There's no fat in them. You can't eat that. You should be only eating oatmeal, rice, and potato. Like, and I was like, well, I hired a coach very specifically so let me just do it, and I'll see if you're right. Great. Well, I remember I won the bodybuilding show, and after the show, he was like, it's impossible that you won. You are a genetic freak. And I'm like, yeah, no, there's nothing genetically freaky about me in the bodybuilding world. And what was funny was he was the typical bro, had those crazy, but guess what he would do? Every time he would hit his goal weight, he would go binge on McDonald's. That was normal for him. But what I was doing was crazy because I was tracking macros. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah. Yeah. And also be aware, athletes, when you look good, suddenly a lot of people want to help you. This is my favorite thing. Like, I have got girls in the gym right now telling me like, oh yeah, this coach keeps coming up to me. I'm like, yeah, no shit. You look amazing. They're
Or
like, hey,
I
do you
think
need any
those-
help
yeah.
with, what is your, like, they'll be like, what does your meal plan look like? Luckily, I have enough of a reputation now. They'll be like, oh, I work with Paul. They're like, oh, okay. But like, it's just funny to me. Like, there's a reason. If you look great, it's the same thing with my business. Like, Pro Physique is doing very well. I get 30 emails a day. Hey, let us help you with your business. I'm like, where were you 12 years ago? I don't need you now.
Yep.
People want to hop on to success. So if you're looking good and doing good, stay doing. Yeah.
Amen.
That was a whole tangent I wasn't expecting, but yeah.
I like it. It was good.
Funny. So, all right, guys. Well, have a great, it's Monday this comes out, right?
Yes.
Have a great Monday. And
Yes.
then when this comes out, we'll be getting ready to go to Universe.
Yes, we will.
Evan.
Yes, we will.
Peace, guys.
Peace.